Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
I am the Groot.
No, Joe, that's not how it really, in the movie, it's just...
I am the Groot.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring two guys getting Christmas Mass pre-gamed and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And that came to us from Brian Sullivan, and he reached out to us via Twitter.
Twitter, yes. BSLax91.
Oh, B-Slacks.
B-Slacks. BS Laxative 91. That's what that means, right, Brian?
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess.
Sullivan, you chode. This week, we're drinking Cold Snap from Sam Adams, which I bought this because I've had Cold Snap, which is a beer by Magnify.
Okay.
And it seems like Sam Adams is picking on the little guy now and stealing their name.
And Magnify.
So I gave them some of my money to support it. No, I wanted to see how this compared. Because I don't think they're similar in type at all, but
it Magnify's a local brewery in the New Jersey area.
Yes, I think I can't remember where it's from. It's wherever Ken is.
I'm sure. Well, yeah, Ken will bring us some. So I don't know what the original tastes like, but
well, I don't think it's not a simple because Cold Snap is a cold brewed IPA, I guess.
Okay.
And this is a white ale brewed with spices and spices added. It's brewed with spices and then spices are added after, I guess. And it's a winter seasonal.
Very interesting taste.
It tastes citrus.
It's a lot of spice. I can definitely taste the white ale and a lot of spice.
It's like a spicier Blue Moon.
Mm-hmm.
Or just a Belgian white, I guess.
It does taste like wintry, though. Which is good for today, because it's really cold out.
It is kind of cold, yeah.
It's a cold weekend. I'm sure you guys will be listening to this 2 weeks from now. You guys will be in some...
the windows down in your car, just jamming some How Many Fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect summer podcast.
You got those shorts on. You got the t-shirt on. T-shirt? Gee, where do you get one of those?
Oh, How Many Fingers Podcast at BigCartel.com.
We're running out. We don't have that blue medium anymore.
We're out of one size. We're running out.
Where are you guys going to get that now? You should have ordered it earlier. The Cardinal is just as cool. Get it.
Yes.
If you are medium, which most of America is.
Yeah.
We're medium America.
I think Middle America's the phrase.
Here in medium America. Oh boy,
Joe, you want to hit me with that IMDb description?
I would love to. And I was listening back to a few episodes, and I was like, I fuck these things up so often.
Well, get it right this time.
Here we go. Set to the
Wrong.
Set to the backdrop of awesome mixtape number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 continues the team's adventures as they unravel the mystery of Peter Quill's true parentage.
Not bad.
Set to the backdrop of awesome mixtape number 2. We'll get into it.
Joe hates music.
I actually hate this. We'll get into it. The first film is a little more obnoxious with music.
Yeah.
This film, they tone it down a little, which I enjoyed.
Let me hit you with some mic notes real quick. This is obviously the sequel to 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, which is based on the Marvel Comics series. And this is the 15th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Excuse me, cold snap. Getting me gassy. It was written and directed by James Gunn, who has previously wrote and or directed a slew of films in the 90s and 2000s. Most notably, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. So this is not his first experience directing a sequel or a franchise.
I thought he just wrote that. Did he direct that?
Oh, yeah, you're probably...
I think
I put them all together. He wrote and or directed these.
Yeah, I think he wrote that.
And then he's done Slither, Super, Guardians of the Galaxy, The Velcro Experiment, and then he did a segment from movie 43, which automatically means I can't watch anything he ever does in the future. Did you ever get around to... I mean, don't, but did you?
No.
Were you forced to see movie 43?
No.
Truly one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
I believe it. Yeah.
Besides The Circle, which we reviewed last week. Check it out.
Yeah, no. Ooh. Yeah.
Movie 3 was god-awful.
I just watched The Velcro Experiment, though, which was not great.
No?
No.
Yeah, because I don't know why I said it like that, because I wasn't expecting it to be great.
Were you looking forward to it? We could have reviewed it.
A great trailer. The window's closed and stuff. But we got an ensemble cast here of Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, who I didn't realize until like doing the mic notes for this was like a former WWE wrestler.
Pro wrestler, yeah.
That's where the whole like Batista bomb comes from.
Yeah.
That's from him. I had no idea. Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper, Kurt Russell, Sylvester Stallone, Sean Gunn, who is the brother of James Gunn.
Little bro.
He plays the Kraglin character. And then Michael Rooker, Karen Gillan, who we just saw in The Circle last week. Well, we reviewed last week. Pom Clementif, Elizabeth Debicki, and Chris Sullivan. And then this is just I love this.
Chris Sullivan, any relation to Brian Sullivan?
BS Laxative 91.
C-Lax? Is that you?
This story I just think is fantastic. In September 2015, Gunn said in a Facebook post that he wanted to use Sneepers, an alien race that first appeared in Marvel Comics in 1964 that's spelled Sneepers, Sneepers, as background characters in the film, but was advised against it by Marvel's legal department because the name was too similar to Sneeper, spelled Snipur, the Icelandic word for clitoris. The Marvel legal department later cleared the use of Sneepers in the film, in part because of all the media coverage Gunn's initial post received. So it was like they couldn't back out at that point, and it was just destined to be some kind of meme at that point.
Oh, that's funny.
That's just a good example of like the studio like reading over every word of a script and being like, who can we offend, or who do we not want to offend in like other countries? Because this is obviously a global release. And then just another tiny footnote, Volume 2 was the first film to be shot with an 8K resolution camera, the Red Weapon 8K. And it does look pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
And then just a little tiny box office tidnote, that's not a word, tidbit. The opening made 180 million worldwide against a projected 160 million. And then it went on to make 509 million at the box office worldwide against a budget of 200 million. So, did pretty well.
Very nice.
Pretty well.
Pretty good. But, yeah. I mean, let's talk about because I know we're both late to the party, the Guardians of the Galaxy party, where the original film came out in, 2014? 14? Not 15? Fuck me, I'm wrong, I guess. But yeah, we both didn't have that experience of seeing the original Guardians of the Galaxy in theaters, which I feel like a lot of people got very hype from. Completely missed the hype train. Didn't see the original until this year, in 2017. What about you? Same, or?
Like 4 months ago, maybe
same.
I saw it.
And I was impressed, but I wasn't like as impressed as I thought I would be. However, it would have to be one of my favorite Marvel movies. Like Mike has said before, Marvel's a low bar to clear. I don't think he said that on the podcast, but he said that. And it's something I agree with. I'm sorry, podcast community, internet community. We don't like superhero movies unless it's 2017. Because I feel like
it does been pretty good in 2017.
3 of my top 5 favorite movies of this year so far, and we're almost halfway through the year. have been superhero movies. I feel like I'm living in a weird alternate universe. It's very bizarre. I've even started to hear some buzz that Logan might be up for Best Picture.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, the regular version or the black and white version?
Oh, the black and chrome version? I
do kind of want to see that. I probably won't pay to see that in theaters, but like if you, because they're doing that because of the behind the scenes photos of the director. I can't remember the director for Logan.
Didn't they do that for Mad Max too? Like black and chrome?
I think as well. But that might have been just a DVD release. This is coming back out in theaters for a small time at the end of the month, I think. Because there's so much buzz around the behind the scenes photos of Logan in black and white. And it does kind of fit because it is kind of like an older, it's about an older characters, and they watch old movies in this as well. In that.
But I feel like it's kind of trying to pick up where that like Deadpool possibly going up for Best Picture leaves like left off kind of. And this is a movie that's
we're going to see at some point a superhero movie is going to get nominated for Best Picture just because there's so many of them. One of them's got to land on a good type of movie.
I think if there's any movie to do it, I think it might be Logan, just because there's these two characters who are like, you know, it's their last act. They're two well-respected actors.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's an Oscar-y movie. Like, I could see it fitting in a lot more than Deadpool.
Well, yeah, because it's not like, you know, washed down like some of these other ones are. Not that really hurts this movie at all, being PG-13. But yeah, I thought I completely missed the hype train for 2014 Guardians of the Galaxy as well. Didn't even see it like when it came out on DVD. I again obviously didn't see it until this year, or I guess late last year probably. And I think it has heart in places that other Marvel movies have failed to have heart. Like and Logan is really the only other example I can think of a Marvel movie besides maybe like the first Spider-Man and maybe like the first Iron Man. Some of the other Iron Man movies had a little bit of heart, but I don't know. The first Guardians movie just moved me, and I don't think it really lived up to the hype, just because I think it's impossible to live up to the hype that was created around Guardians of the Galaxy. Because again, you have all these people that have come from watching like the Avengers and all these other ones, and it's
of course it's gonna blow you away.
It's the type of movie that they wanted to see, but done right and done well. And it wasn't incredible, but it was. I don't know. I really enjoyed the first Guardians. That was like, if we had done it, it would be a 3.5 or 4 finger movie probably.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I don't know, and I had some problems with the first film, but this is a film where they fixed a lot of that. You know, after watching the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I suddenly understood what Suicide Squad was going for and miserably failed at. I suddenly understood why every like DC trailer had to be jam-packed with like dad rock. Or even like the Thor
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok trailer that came on before this movie was very like, they had some sort of Led Zeppelin like immigrant song or something. Yeah.
I almost said Song of Ice and Fire. That's not what that song is called. Well, they say Ice and Stone, and that's what I was thinking.
And they also try to, I mean, I haven't seen either the first two Thor films, but like it looked very like, I don't know, it just looked like it was like space all of a sudden. There were people who were different colors, and it just seems very...
It's adding vibrancy. I mean, shout out to Squad, but Marvel has been very much like sort of like gray washed in terms of color grading, and it's just a lot of gray and like muted colors and not very vibrant for a superhero movie. And I think that was what made the first Guardians of the Galaxy stand out as well. It's just, I mean, they have a little freedom because they're in space, but you know, they can make this alien blue and this alien yellow, and when this spaceship explodes, it can be like fucking vibrant, like lime green and stuff. And like they could just put color everywhere. Even just in the background as they're flying, like, you know, the entire like cosmos is like this awesome spectrum of like rainbow colors, and it's colors that we don't get to see elsewhere in like the Marvel universe. And that's what Thor Ragnarok looks like it's doing, is adding color to a Marvel movie, because the first two Thors are very much gray washed movies. It's even when they're in space, like they're pretty. It's, if it's not gray, it's just one like shade of blue, kind of.
Aside from the colors, it still looks like a blatant. like whether the movie's actually like that or not, it still looks like a blatant ripoff of kind of like.
Well, because they're adding all these different types of races of aliens to, and then like in the first.
Just like the music and the sort of like text effects where like it kind of like ripples out like different like colors of the rainbow kind of with every like that's so bizarre to put on like a Thor movie, you know? Like it was just like
I mean I don't know anything about the Ragnarok storylines. I don't know if that
the whole planet storyline is it's just it's a story, you know, that takes place out in space. I just think they're trying to put like a Guardians of the Galaxy spin on it because it has had such a cult following, kind of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're trying to hype up maybe the Thor series because maybe that hasn't done.
I know they're also like I mean, with Guardians of the Galaxy, they're trying to create like one of the. I don't think it's Kevin Feige or whoever the main producer is, but someone at the head was saying that they're trying to essentially create another Avengers. Like another group of like, not that they're going to do solo movies for all of them, but just another group of superheroes as well as the Avengers. But then when Avengers Infinity War comes, the Guardians of the Galaxy are supposed to be in that as well. Look at the fucking cast list for Avengers Infinity War. It's fucking insane. There's going to be a parking lot of like trailers just for like the actors in that movie. But it's just funny to think about like, so you've got like the Avengers, which is like all these solo movies, all these solo characters put into one, and then you take the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is like a ton of characters, and add that. It's like there's going to be like an Avengers above that. That's like the Avengers of the Avengers plus Guardians of the Galaxy plus like some other, because they also, I mean, not to spoil anything too early, but you've all watched probably, I'm sure, either this movie or like, oh, what are the end credits scenes for this? They have basically another type of like superhero group that shows up at the end for the Ravagers. Right. Well, Sylvester Stallone. I don't know if you watched the end credit sequences.
Oh my god, the fucking 15
5
credit.
There's literally 5. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's so many. Yeah, I mean that has to be setting up something for the third movie or something.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But yeah, just to touch back on the music, and I'm sure we'll come back around to it again and again and again. I don't know. Just now that I know where this sort of like music, this sort of like dad rock influence is coming from, like I can kind of appreciate that Guardians of the Galaxy's music is very like diegetic, you know, like it fits. It's from this world, you know, and it fits in. I felt like the first movie, like I was just saying before, did I already say this out loud? But the first movie just had like an obnoxious amount of music. It was borderline just like this feature-length music video, and I didn't really like that about it. I feel like this film kind of reels back a little bit.
But it was also part of the plot in the first one. Like it's not like they're acknowledging it. Not that it's not a device to create those scenes.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I'll get into
but
that.
I think it's well excused.
Is that, I mean, it's used as this emotional trigger. Really, it's kind of like, oh, I already kind of have ties into this song from this older song, and they're playing this matched with, you know, emotional imagery, and you're kind of getting this, or just kind of, oh, it's this kind of sweet song matched with this kind of like violent imagery, and it creates this, I don't know, a pretty interesting image, or just a film. But even without the theater hype of the Guardian Galaxies, the original film, there were some details of, I just want to get this out in the air before we start and get into this movie. There were some details about the first movie that kind of bothered me. I was talking about this with you earlier in Squad. But Star-Lord left Earth when he was 10, but a lot of his dialogue is very like adult Earth humor. Within the movie, I kind of wanted him to be like more man-child than he actually was. I think that could have been like a pretty interesting element. Plus, like, I kind of didn't understand why Chris Pratt had to be so ripped. Like, it was kind of like, I remember, like, especially if he's kind of like this huge, like, man-child kind of, who, like, stopped having parents when he was, like, 10. Like, I remember, I don't know, that was, like, a huge thing in the media when, like, this movie came out. Like, Chris Pratt, he's
hot now.
He used to be fat. Yeah, fatty boy on Parks and Rec. Now he's a bulk boy.
God, he was hideous.
Now he's hot. Now he's a bulk boy. Huh? And he's not like a superhero either, which bothers me. He's not like fucking like, I just went under like some fucking World War II science experiment, or I'm a Hulk.
He is technically he's not doing any like real. He's shooting guns and floating around with like a jetpack, so he's not doing anything with his body that would lead to that kind of physique.
It's just bizarre, kind of.
But I don't mind it because he is fucking hot, so
right.
It works as being like the leading man of a movie.
But I also like Andy Dwyer, who's kind of like chubby and goofy, and I feel like that would just kind of even add more to this kind of goofy movie, kind of, you know, like we already have somebody who's ripped. We have John Batista.
I think that's just too bold of a decision for Marvel, though. They weren't willing to go that far because it was already a weird enough risk to take this sort of. I mean, I don't know. I might just be speaking for myself, but I had no fucking idea what Guardians of the Galaxy was until the movie came out. Like that was
Dave Bautista. No one did. It's a fucking obscure comic that people are now pretending like they know all about, you know. It was just kind of like Red Letter Media was joking about that, kind of like how like after Guardians of the Galaxy was like a hit, like there was like men in suits like kind of like throwing comics, like going through like different like like drawers of comics, like we gotta find the next one. Like but yeah, a lot of my complaints were kind of fixed. Like we were talking about this in the car, like Mike was like, this is like the fourth time I've said this now, but Mike was like, you know, if you weren't that crazy about like the first one, I've heard a lot of people that weren't like crazy about the first one really liked the second one. And I was like, that is the dumbest fucking logic I've ever heard, Mike. Of course I'm not gonna like this one. They're doubling down on what they did in the first one. But it's wrong. I like this one more. I feel like a lot of shit that I was confused about in the first one, or I thought was left unanswered and kind of hindered the movie, or at least my experience of the movie was answered in this movie, or like corrected during the sequel, like his dad's genetics, kind of like prove why maybe he might be ripped, kind of, you know, if he's half of like this god kind of thing. And then in this movie, Star-Lord makes like no like adult Earth jokes. It's just plain old, just kind of
very childish in this movie.
He like humorously draws from what he knows from when he was like born to like when he was 10. Like the other crew members like take like Star-Lord's like retelling of like Knight Rider as like an allegory from Earth. Like it's like about David Hasselhoff. It's like very funny.
I can't my memory's a little fuzzy of the first Guardian. What adult Earth jokes can you think of?
He says, somebody says, your spaceship is very clean. And he said, well, he's like, with like the ladies I bring in here, if you like shone a black light all over this ship, he's like, it would look like a Jackson Pollock painting. And I was kind of like, ooh, that's like a weird tone. And he has like a few of those moments where I'm like, why would a 10-year-old know who Jackson Pollock is, kind of? Like, I understand that a man-child grows up and he wants to fuck, kind of, you know? But like, why somebody would know...
What is weird, just because it's not in tune with, like... I think more of, like, the culture stuff would be what would bother me, is that, like, he doesn't know Earth culture after the 80s when he was brought up or whatever. But there is still sort of, like, I mean, the multiverse or universe at large does sort of have its own sort of culture.
Right.
And, I mean, because it's written by humans, obviously. But, like, the aliens from other areas of the universe... do have their own kind of like mature sensibilities too. So he would grow up to some extent. But yeah, that it's like slightly just too much in that line.
It's playing to the theater and not so much the universe, you know? Like it's just kind of, but then again, they kind of fix it in this one where like at the end, it won't spoil too much, but he's handed a Zune kind of like, and it's a joke, like Zune, the MP3 player. And it's kind of like somebody found this junking, you know, like it's just kind of like the junk from Earth kind of. And like maybe he can kind of learn what's going on on Earth through, I don't know.
I mean, I think they're also trying to open themselves up to have more genre possibilities for the third movie.
How could you? I mean,
third movie's going to be like 90s music probably, or...
Yeah, and also he's run out of tapes. His mom gave him the second mixtape as a present. But yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about this movie itself. I felt like the intro started off a little weird. Like,
I didn't like
I came into this movie, I liked the first movie more than you did.
Mm-hmm.
I had higher hopes for this movie coming in. And I mean, it's not a spoiler, but I was not disappointed by this movie. But the intro definitely gave me a weird vibe to start, and then I had more appreciation for it later. But it kind of like, it starts off feeling like it's trying too hard to like reintroduce us to these characters, just in like the types of jokes that they're making. Like, and it's not the worst type of like exposition line I've ever heard, but like the one line where he's like, oh, why are you using like a gun? I thought guns are my things. I usually use a sword. And she's like, well, we're here to defend these batteries from an interdimensional space beast, so I brought like a gun or whatever. And it's like it's just maybe just too quick and putting too much information into one like line. And it's successful in that it's serving two purposes. Like, it's working as a punchline and it's coming naturally in his, sort of a little argument with her, but it is like, it's just it's too clear to see that like, oh, I know what you're doing here. You're trying to let us know what exactly they're doing on this little like platform thing that they're on. That combined with just like all the other humor that's going on in that first scene, like it's a little shaky starting off. I think it's the only real weak part of the script. I think this is a fantastic script.
It definitely was, because like, especially because I think the thing that fell the shortest, the only like thing that I thought was going to be funny from this film was like the concept of Baby Groot, and like, he's somehow like, me and Siri has no idea what Guardians of the Galaxy is, but like we laugh every time at like the fucking like stupid Hulu like commercials in between, and we like look at each other and we're like, I am Groot, like, and like we laugh about it, and she has no idea what the fuck this is, kind of like, it's just something that's funny to anybody, like Minions or something, like that's but Baby Groot in like this like opening scene it's not very funny.
It was,
and I kind of don't understand why it wants to fight everything. Like, I just like didn't really get like a lot of Baby Groot's characteristics. I think
it's trying to just be in opposition to itself, like a contradictory thing, in order to create humor. Like, it's this little cute, adorable thing, but it wants to fight, and it says like the F word and stuff like that.
Because Groot wasn't like that in the first movie.
No,
like,
he was
super
very
loving pacifist.
And, I didn't like. I shouldn't say that. I don't know how I feel about the Groot dancing scene, because I think visually that's a really awesome scene, and it's a cool credit sequence in terms of like Groot's dancing, the little baby Groot is dancing, which is a little awkward, but like we have out of focus this crazy battle going on in the background, and like one by one the characters will kind of hop over and like interact with Groot to just kind of keep us entertained while these like massive credits are like flying by for this massive undertaking of a movie. But it just felt a little too knowing from the creators, because like that whole, like from the first movie, the baby Groot dancing at the end, like, letting you know that he's alive. That like the gif of baby Groot dancing was shared like everywhere. It was so popular, just that concept and that scene. And this almost felt like a little too knowing, like, hey, we know you responded to that thing specifically, so we're going to give you like a gratuitous like 2.5 minutes of baby Groot like dancing now. Like, it was just a little too... Just pretend you didn't know how we reacted to the first movie and just write the movie you want to make, almost.
I mean, I would have taken it if it was cute. I would have taken it if it was funny. Just this whole opening credit sequence, I was not crazy about.
I don't like the group dancing part. I just like the fact that everything else is like out of focus in the background. Like, that was... Yeah. It's just the kind of the opposition of this thing is dancing and having fun, but in the background, this crazy battle for their life is like going on, and we don't even really get to fully witness it. I thought was a nice sort of contradiction, but I just don't like the fact that it's Groot dancing that we're watching in the beginning.
Right. There was there's one scene where Drax kind of like falls on his side, and like his face takes up the whole screen, and Groot's kind of dancing in front of it. That just looks so wildly like this is a computer image dancing in front of a real person's face. Like, just I don't know. They could like maybe it was realistic lighting, but they could have.
It's also just conceptually weird, because like when he looks at Groot, Groot stops dancing, and then he looks away, and Groot starts dancing again, and then he looks and he stops, and it's like, where does that fit into Groot's character at all. Like, we're digging a little deep, but like,
wait, did he do that during this movie?
During the intro dancing scene, the scene you're talking about, where Drax falls down and Groot is in front of him. Groot dances, and then Drax looks at him with his eyes, and he stops, and then Drax looks away, and he starts dancing again.
Well, that might be a callback to, like, literally when Groot's, like, baby Groot is alive in the last one, because the scene where he's dancing in the pot, every time Drax was like sharpening like one of his knives, and every time he'd look over, baby Groot would just freeze kind of and pretend like he was so that might be a callback. But yeah, he just looked terrible though. That was the only shot in the movie where I was like, ew.
Everything else looks pretty good in this movie.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, obviously the 8K camera helps for a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it was done on green screen. I think I forget what the studio is for. I mean, Marvel, but I don't know who. They did it in Atlanta, but they used every single like sound stage at whatever studio it was that did this movie from the production end.
Right.
Because they were not only doing like the green screen, but they were actually building. They wanted to try and get as much physical sets in there as possible with green screen behind them, obviously.
I do like, in a sense, I do like that opening scene though. There was like the electric light orchestra or something song that was in the beginning.
Maybe that was there at one point. I can't remember if that was the one during that though. Probably.
I don't know. But again, I mean, that song kind of comes in because Rocket's constructed, like, I put together these speakers, while you guys are talking, and they're like, that's not the motive for like what's about to happen, kind of like they're kind of doing like this freelance work. And again, there's like, this movie takes a lot of responsibility of being diegetic with the music to like an annoying level during some points of this film, where Rocket at some point in the film asks Yondu if there's any of Star-Lord's old music on board the ship that they can listen to while they kill
that
people.
I was just I like the concept of Star-Lord playing the music,
yes,
but when it's someone else doing it, it's like, because it's almost like when he does it, it should be almost annoying to the other characters. Like, focus on the fight or whatever. But when the other characters do it, that's a little too. It's showing the writer's fingertips in terms of how can we get this other music cutscene in here when Star-Lord's not actually in this fight scene.
It's also like when Rocket and Nebula and Baby Groot are kind of stranded on this planet, and Rocket is fixing the spaceship or whatever. And there's a bunch of there's a mass of people like approaching, and Rocket has to fight all of them off or whatever. It's a great set piece, but Rocket is kind of like listening to this music, and you're kind of like, where does this music come from? Kind of like Chris Pratt has left, or Star-Lord has left with like this like cassette tape. They have like this limited amount, like they play it both ways, where they're kind of like, they'll go out of their way to be like, hey, do you have any sort of old tape to like. They'll just kind of be playing music and you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Because Rocket's like humming along to the music in that once. I don't know. It's just weird.
I think for the most part, though, this is a really great script for a superhero movie.
It's fantastic.
Or just for like a movie that has, like, there's so much going on in this movie in terms of how many characters there are.
Yeah.
And how many locations they go to, and just ridiculous concepts. And nothing really feels like it comes out of left field, because this is how you fucking like establish things in a movie so that the audience can just enjoy what happens without being like, wait, why is that here? Or where did that come from? Like, everything makes sense in this movie. And if you like trace it, you can find like connections for everything. Like, maybe I'll save this point for later because I don't want to spoil stuff too early, especially since a lot of people want to see this. But like stuff as simple as like, later in the movie, Rocket uses like the batteries from the intro scene. Again, another example of how much they trace everything throughout this movie. Like in any other movie, that would have just been an intro scene where it's like, oh, here's just this one extraneous third party like freelance thing that we're doing just to give you your early movie action sequence, and then we'll go to something else completely. But they're doing that for the Sovereign, and then the Sovereign are a huge part of the rest of this entire movie. They're the kind of the skeleton through line of the entire movie, and their actions at that thing where they're defending the batteries, and then the batteries end up becoming something as a through line for the entire movie where Rocket steals the batteries.
And the Sovereign are also sort of this red herring of what the antagonist is of this movie, kind of, which I love.
But then Rocket like uses the batteries later as like fuel for an explosive device he's making towards the end of the movie, and like that could have been like a weird thing in a lesser script where they would have been like, oh, didn't you know batteries are like explosive?
Yes.
Like that, like we can use these.
Yeah.
But earlier in the movie, when the Sovereign were chasing them, they were like, oh, be careful! The batteries that they stole that we're trying to get back, those are explosive. So it's like you can kind of peed out and leak out this little information early in the script and have it serve two purposes, where it's working during that thing then, but then it's also establishing information that is necessary for later in the script. And that's just like, that's how you write a good fucking script. And there's so many examples of that in this, even for like emotional stuff, where like later in the movie, one of the bigger sort of reveals is that like Yondu does sort of have this kind of parental affection for Star-Lord or Peter. And it's not as, I mean, it's a twist, but it's not like a huge, shocking surprise because they've established it within the script as well. Like earlier in the movie, like Kraglin sort of starts this whole mutiny because he's like, whenever Star-Lord like screws up, you like go out of your like way to like save him and whatnot, like at our expense. Like, don't you care about us at all? And like, yeah, that's setting up the mutiny, but it's also establishing like, yeah, he's got this soft spot for Star-Lord that's been going on this entire time. So that when he like reveals like, yeah, like I did all this stuff that we'll get to later for you, it's because I've had this affection for you as like a parent sort of figure this entire time. And then like the whole climax scene is like an entire ladder of just like this thing sets up this thing, which sets up this thing, which calls back to this thing from earlier in the movie. And nothing of it feels like too complex or like out of place because it's also well established. Even like the jokes in this movie are like plant and pay off for later. Like, I think one of the things that I laughed at hardest in this movie, it's partly because it's a callback, but it's also just funny delivery. Earlier in the movie, like on the intro scene, again, this is why I'm saying that like I hated the intro scene at first. As the movie progresses, there's so much that gets accomplished in that intro scene that's like brilliant in terms of the script. But like the Drax character, who I love in this movie, I think he's the funniest character.
They give him so many
movie.
more jokes, and I think it's because he's so beloved in the first movie. And again, like he's a fucking WWE wrestler. Like how does he have better like comedic timing and delivery than like Bradley Cooper, honestly, and in my opinion. I think that was another problem maybe with this movie sometimes, and a lot with the first movie, I think, is that Rocket falls very short with like a lot of his.
I think his character is a little harder to define.
Yes.
Because he's sort of similar to Star-Lord in terms of having this massive ego about stuff, but then he's got some weirder sensitivities as well.
He's a good character anytime.
He's harder to write jokes for, though.
Yeah,
too.
no. Anytime comedy comes into it, it just gets very muddled.
Like Drax is almost like a sitcom character in terms of like, you know, like on Friends. Like if someone has to be the dumb character, it's Joey because we've established what Joey is. And Drax is kind of like the Joey of this, where like if someone needs to not get something, it's Drax, and like he just has that avenue where the jokes kind of write themselves for Drax, and you can have a scene and be like, okay, what's Drax's funny line here? It's because he doesn't understand something. Whereas like Rocket kind of, you have to be a little more clever to find a funny line for Rocket. But the scene where in the intro where they're all wearing like the jumpsuit or spacesuit things, and it's like, oh, I can't wear those. They hurt I have sensitive nipples. And then later on when he puts on the spacesuit, he just screams like, my nipples, as he like flies away. Like it's a simple thing, but it's like a callback that it's the joke is more effective because it's a callback to something earlier that was established to serve another purpose at that point in the introduction.
I love when Mantis gets hit with like a huge like piece of metal or something, or rock or something, and then like there's like a 2 or 3 second beat and Drax goes, "Watch out!" I lost it. Yeah, he's a great character.
Or then like another example of plant and payoff is like Taserface, where they have the entire scene where they're like laughing at Taserface's like name. So then like later when he's like, oh, you know, like make sure he just knows the name of the man who sold him out, and it's like Taserface, and then like she laughs at it, like stuff like that. It's like a compounding laughter that works more because we've laughed at it earlier and you've established the joke. And there's the script. It's not as like other scripts where it's kind of like a mirror that you fold over itself. It's just there's so much establishing in the first half of this that has a bigger payoff because it was so well established in the later half. That's my rant about how good this fucking script is.
Man, another thing about this fucking script is, and I'm gonna go into spoiler territory, probably. How long are we into this review?
About 40 minutes.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Is that fucking... I'm gonna come up with a confession because I paid to go see The Circle, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go see to pay the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I started watching like some of this online, and then I heard like the first song that was in this film was like Looking Glass's Brandy.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, fuck man, it takes me back to like, obviously I wasn't alive in the 70s, but like even just something as dumb as like Girl Talks, like Here's the Thing or whatever, like that's in that like I mean, like he uses it as a sample, and it's from this fond memory time, you know, and I'm just like, I just want to be overwhelmed with that in a theater. Like
there's a very specific type of music that's in the first movie and this movie where it's like that, like
it's girl talk music,
late 70s, early 80s type music, maybe a little bit of like 60s in there, and it's like it's not the type of music that you're sick of hearing on the radio. That's maybe why I didn't like the ELO one, because I feel like I've heard that song too much. And what was great about the other movies was it was kind of like deep cuts or like lesser known songs from artists that you did
especially
like.
the Cat Stevens song. I feel like that wasn't, I didn't recognize that song.
Yeah, like there's a lot of songs that I don't recognize, but it just fits that like really good, feel good late 70s, early 80s, like, you know, like glam rock almost kind of like vibe.
Or just, Looking Glass, I don't know.
It all feels like it could be like Boston's like More Than a Feeling. Like,
yeah.
Like if you put on like a Spotify like playlist from More Than a Feeling, it would be all songs you got from there.
Yeah, but the Looking Glass Brandy, Looking Glass's Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, really fucking did me in this film. And again, I don't really have that much of a connection to this film besides hearing it in a Girl Talk song, really. I mean, I'm very familiar with the song as well, outside of Greg Gillis, but
which Girl Talk one is that in?
It's the Kelly Clarkson. It's called Here's the Thing. It's the Since You've Been Gone sample, and at the end they like repeat that.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, they start off. And it's like Star-Lord's mom and dad essentially like driving like down like a country road in the 70s, and they're listening to that song, and the mom, who we've only seen like minutes before death in the real pits of chemotherapy, is kind of like alive and vibrant and listening to the song, and she knows every word. And then we hear it again when Star-Lord's listening to it, and I think maybe he's schmoozing what's her name?
Gamora.
Yeah, Gamora. And then again, he connects with his father with this song. And then later, his father says about this song, he says, no, it's not about, you know, how Brandy, like he says, she'd make a fine bride, but that's not like his intention. He's married to the sea.
Yeah.
You know, that is not his intention. And you start to kind of get the, like, without him having to over-explain that he was more about conquest than love, he explains it through, like, this, like, well-known song, and it's just like, oh, fuck! Like, it really got me, because, like, again, they're planting this kind of payoff. It's like, hey, remember the song? Hey, remember the song? Hey, remember the song? Payoff. And it's, ooh, that fucking got me hard.
Yeah, that was good.
It didn't get me hard, but it got me.
Joe was hard in the theater.
It got me
that he didn't pay for a ticket for.
Hard. Oh no, you know what? I went to go see The Circle, and then I was going to sneak into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and some guy at the snack bar was giving me a weird look, and I was like, fuck it.
Oh, so you did pay for it.
I'm going to leave. Well, I had seen enough movies that it was free, and then also it was recently my birthday, and I got a small popcorn, and dear Jesus,
Still recovering.
I saw it yesterday morning, and I felt like shit the entire rest of the day. And then this morning I spent with I had a horrible time passing it, really. Like, it was just, I didn't even get it with butter, just theater popcorn.
I think theater popcorn is just a horrible invention to begin with, because, like, I'm way more distracted by the sound of someone fucking eating, and popcorn's a loud fucking food.
Yeah.
Like, even before it gets into your mouth, just the sound of, like, having to open your mouth wide enough for a popcorn, like, handful, and then, like, the chewing of popcorn.
Scooping it, yeah.
And yeah, everything that has to do with popcorn is noisy. So whoever fucking invented popcorn or pushed popcorn as a theater food, fuck you.
Or it's just cheap as fuck. I couldn't believe, like, I made popcorn here with, like, paper lunch bags and just corn kernels, and I couldn't believe that they gave me like a popcorn bag that was like this tall, like maybe like 4 or 5 inches tall, and it was like, they were like, this normally would have been $6.79, but you get it for free because you had a birthday. And it was like, the fucking popcorn does not cost $6.79 to make.
I mean, that's why it's a theater food, because it's so cheap to make, and they can produce so much of it and charge it.
Because they're honestly probably not making money off these fucking movies. They're just making money off the fucking. It's just like, I don't know. It's like fucking airport. Guys, steal movies, smuggle sex into theaters.
Oh man.
Would you like another beer?
Yeah, grab me another, please. I was just gonna say that I think my reaction to this movie is sort of like a reversal of my reaction to the 2014 Guardians of the Galaxy. Whereas with the 2014 one, I didn't think it was that funny. Like, I thought it was very fun. I had a lot of fun watching the first one, but I was more touched by the emotions of the first one, and surprised by how much it made me feel and stuff like that. Whereas this one, this movie's fucking hilarious. Like, this is one of the funniest movies I feel like I've seen in a long time. Like, I was just having a grand old time laughing to myself. Like, there's other people there laughing with me, but just laughing along to this movie. By myself. I mean, I did see it by myself.
Me too.
But just laughing along with this movie, and I felt like my one complaint with this movie is that it maybe tried too hard when it came to the emotional aspect of this movie, where I felt like, I mean, we can get into this more when we touch on more of the other plot points, but I feel like every pair of characters had like an emotional climax and sort of like reveal, and it started to get to be like too much at one point, and I felt like I could see the writer's fingerprints in terms of like what worked with the first movie. People really connected to the emotional aspect. Maybe we'll throw like 10 different emotional scenes in this, and it felt like a little too much for me. And the humor was more what saved this movie for me, because I didn't feel like I connected as much to the emotions in this,
right?
Even with there being more of them.
I had a complete opposite reaction, which I know we've talked about a little bit before. I think I found the first one a little more humorous, and I found this one a little less humorous. Maybe just because there was a lot of jokes that missed for me. Again, I was in a fucking dead silent theater. I'm trying to remember. There's like a really like long joke that was just silent in my theater. I don't remember. I don't even know what we were supposed to laugh at. I don't know. There's some really... Oh, maybe it's the taser face thing.
Oh, but it was just laughs in there?
No, but it was just like, I kind of thought it was funny, but I never really like laughed out loud at that part. I was just kind of like, this is still going on.
There's a lot of like degrees of jokes in this. Like, that's like more of like the low to like medium laughter jokes, where it's just kind of like, okay. And I could agree, it probably did go on a little bit too long. Right. But it's also setting up for that sort of laughter later. Like, that got a big laugh when the sovereign gold lady like laughs when he tells her like, oh, let him know the name of the man who sold him out or whatever.
But however, emotionally, this destroyed me in the third act. The first and the second act, I just really wasn't sure about this movie, but the third act paid off tenfold for me. And I cried. Like, like it was so hard hitting for me, especially because like it felt like I had just kind of been waiting for this moment since the first movie, and I was finally reaching that. And I think it's because the first movie was so plot driven. In this movie,
They had to establish a lot in the first movie.
Yeah, no. Oh, of course. But I think they had the luxury of
being in an established universe.
Of it being, established and everything. They had the luxury of, instead of plot, this was a character-driven movie. And I love character-driven movies. I love character studies. It's just, I got to see so much more of these characters. And just, I don't know. It became... I do, I don't think a lot of the Rocket's, Rocket's jokes land or whatever, but he and, what's his name? Yondu talking, Rocket's like, I want to save Star-Lord so I can kind of hold this over his head, and Yondu's like, that's not why you want to save him. And it's kind of it's about, there's so many different themes in this. It's kind of like all these people who have been rejected, and they've had to put on such a tough exterior and kind of be like these scrappy people, and they've come together in now this safe environment of friends, and they're they can't be vulnerable enough to be kind of loved as a family. And I didn't get that from there was this kind of sacrifice of Groot in the other one, but I never got some sort of emotion or feeling from that first one. In this one, it's kind of he's Yondu is you have friends now, and they're your family, and they have to relate of kind of I was a child who was in child slavery, and you were somebody who was created as a science experiment. You were none of us, neither of us were ever truly loved, and that's why we act the way that we do. It's kind of this kind of metaphor for just abused children, kind of, and it's kind of this one abused child kind of taking, Yondu taking on this sort of father role for Star-Lord, who is somebody who is kind of abandoned himself by his father and his mother dying. And it's just, I don't know. I think it all really
I think there's moments that work. I really like the whole Star-Lord and his father, and then obviously Star-Lord and Yondu in this. I think that storyline is great, because I think what I liked about the emotions in the first movie is that it was just simpler and more clear-cut in terms of, there's a lot of characters, but it's really Peter and the rest of the Guardians and their relationship with each other, rather than Peter with each and every single one of the Guardians, which is what this movie kind of is. There's Star-Lord and his father, there's Star-Lord and Yondu, there's Star-Lord and Gamora, and there's the scene with Drax and Mantis, which is a whole new character introduced. There's an emotional scene with Gamora and Nebula. There's an emotional scene with Rocket and Yondu. That was the one that I thought was very extraneous, in my opinion. Was I get what you're saying, but I was that there's so many other things going on. Just focus on some of the other emotions. We can get to that in another movie, especially because we already get an emotional scene with Yondu and Star-Lord, so we didn't need Rocket and Yondu to have an emotional scene. There's an emotional scene with Rocket and Star-Lord as well at the end, when he decides I'm not going to lose another two people today, and he's kind of revealing that he's upset that he thinks he might be losing Star-Lord. And then there's a scene with Yondu and the Ravagers at the end. There was too many emotional scenes for me to really focus on any one of them. Whereas the first one, it was really just Star-Lord's relationship with his mother, and then that was tied into him finding a new family to sort of fill that void that he's been looking for this entire time. And this just had too many emotional ones, and there was too many different types of emotional plots I felt like they were going for.
I do love that James Gunn has I think he, I don't know, somebody can fact check me on this, but I think he is the only Marvel writer and director who's just solo kind of doing this by himself, and he seems to have real love for these characters. I mean, even Yondu, to go further into that kind of what's going on with him, is a character I really didn't take to in the first movie.
Oh, no, yeah. I was almost more... I was kind of... Seeing the trailers, I was upset that they were bringing him back.
Right, yeah. And
I was wrong, but...
yeah. And he resurfaces, again, as this kind of foster dad or surrogate father. And I think... And he becomes the heart of the movie by the end, which I thought was really... Whew, I don't know. It just had a really emotional toll on me. And
And I think that
it's kind of like, why can't we put fucking any sort of emotional, like, resonance in any of these other Marvel movies? It's so easy. Like, this wasn't hard to do. This wasn't a stretch. I don't know.
Again, this is not, I want to compliment this script, but I also want to say that it's not like a brilliant, like, this is not groundbreaking stuff. This is just what happens when you do a script the right way.
Yeah.
This is a good and maybe even great script, but it's not genius or brilliant. The other movies that we've been fed have also just been not doing their due diligence in terms of setting up this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, even in this, like, so you take us watching the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, we don't really get drawn to the Michael Rooker Yondu character. And then in this one, because of all the scenes that were shown with him, like, they know exactly where the movie's going. They could have very easily had him just sort of be the character that he was in the first movie, but we get to see him in, like, different lights, like, him being rejected by the Ravagers in the beginning of this movie. Mm-hmm. That's very conscious. That's trying to set us up to understand him deeper as a character and why he would be searching for connection in other places, i.e. Star-Lord and characters like that. Like, because he's known the feeling of rejection and not having, it's like Sylvester Stallone's kind of like his father figure. It almost seems like he's looking for acceptance from him, and being rejected by him makes him kind of want to accept someone else. And, like, you have little scenes like that make it's not like a complete surprise in the end. Like, if we had the ending scene, or even like that line where he at the end where he's like, I may not be your father, but I'm your daddy, or whatever at the end. Like, great line also, because it's funny, but being, like, really touching at the same time. If you took that line or that scene and showed us that immediately after watching the first Guardians of the Galaxy, we'd be like, you're fucking crazy. But this movie establishes where this character is in order for that to happen in this movie. And, like, that's stuff that I feel like the other Marvel movies don't do. Like, even like Civil War, like, there was so much change of opinion and change of what characters were doing or feeling in Civil War that was not really established even within Civil War itself. Like, they all just kind of were like, oh, I'm on this side and I'm on this side.
Yeah.
And Civil War should have had, like, there's moments in Civil War that should have been really touching if they were well established. Like, just the fighting between Captain America and Iron Man, and the betrayal between the two of them, and, like, scenes that it seemed like people were touched by, but maybe shouldn't have been touched by because there wasn't really the due diligence done.
I also liked, you said before that there's, like, kind of like these different degrees of humor. And again, some of them I thought hit and some, like, missed. But I think one of the times I laughed the hardest, and I was laughing, but I was also feeling, like, serious feelings. And this is before you really get into the feels of, like, Yondu between he and Star-Lord. Is he and Star-Lord are kind of like, they're coming back from something, and Star-Lord's kind of, like, hovering down, like, with his jetpack or, like, jet feet or whatever the fuck he's using. And Yondu's kind of, like, riding his arrow down. And Chris Pratt's laughing, and he's like, what's so funny? And he's like, you look like Mary Poppins. He's like, is Mary Poppins cool? And he says, hell yeah, he's cool. And he says, hey y'all, I'm Mary Poppins. It's just, like, such, like, a weird feel-good moment, because that could have been like this joke where he just, like, kind of, like, digs deeper into him, like everybody in the Guardians does, where it's like kind of like, fuck you, no, she's actually a nanny woman, kind of. It's like, hell yeah, he's cool. Like, it's just, like, a very,
like, and again, I think all the emotions between, like, Yondu and Star-Lord are really well established, but I think, like, the scene between, like, Yondu and Rocket is not so well established, and that's why that doesn't work. Like, I don't see Rocket really connecting with Yondu, even if they do have something to connect on, because that groundwork hasn't really been laid in this movie, or even in the previous movie, I felt.
Yeah, but
there's times where I wanted this movie to sort of treat its characters kind of like It's Always Sunny would treat characters, where, like, It's Always Sunny, like, there's never, or even, like, Veep is really good at this, like, their characters never really, when there's opportunity to be like, you know what, like, I was in the wrong, you were right, or to have some kind of, like, connection with another character, it always goes to just, like, well, you know what, fuck you, like, humor and whatnot. Like, and they never really get to that real, like, emotional point. And it works really well in those shows. And I think there were moments in this where they could have leaned more on the humor and less on, like, the emotions of this. Because I think there's enough emotions in this, just through the Yondu, Star-Lord, time or through line. I think we could have had less of like the Star-Lord and Gamora sort of through line. I don't have a huge complaint about that because they don't spend a whole lot of time on it, so it's not a big deal.
I like that they kind of announce it's very meta with the like he's kind of like right. They don't want it to be like Cheers, because like, oh, if they got together, the ratings would go down. Kind of, it's kind of like this kind of like Jim and Pam thing where it's like once they get it, once they get together, the series is over. It is like kind of like once Star-Lord and
The Office.
Yes. Right. Why did they fucking go on 4 more seasons or 5 more seasons? It's kind of like once Star-Lord and Gamora get together, it's kind of that completes an arc.
Yeah.
From the beginning. So yeah, it's just this whole series is so meta and strange, and I loved the first part just because it was wild and crazy, and it was like a sci-fi adventure. Like it did feel like a newer Star Wars kind of. Like it was just kind of like this newer. I don't know.
They're just lovable characters. I think it points more to the brilliance of the first movie in establishing these characters, where apart from like a sort of awkward first scene, after that we kind of just fall right into loving these characters again, and we can put them in situations that make us laugh at them in different ways or feel emotionally for them in different ways. Like Drax having sort of like a semi-love interest, I think is a really funny move in this. Like his relationship with like Mantis, and just how he keeps calling her like hideous. I think the time I probably laughed the hardest, besides the nipples scene, is at the end where he's like, Mantis, you really are beautiful. And then there's a pause, and he's like, on the inside.
The thing I can applaud this movie the most is that it's just this fucking self-contained movie. Even in the first movie, did a pretty good job where like the Infinity Stone, like I didn't even realize like Infinity War, like it was just very like the Infinity Stone just seemed like something from their universe,
the movie,
right? Yeah. It didn't seem like Marvel fitting Marvel into Marvel, because I heard you like Marvel, so I put your Marvel in Marvel. Yeah,
Marvel making a dick-sized hole in there so that Marvel can fuck it
yes,
later.
Marvel can. I mean, now that we're probably kind of at the end of the review, I do love. Hold on. First of all, I completely forgot about this, but was it the first scene that it wasn't the first scene? Maybe it was the first scene after the credits, kind of that credit battle with the big, which is ridiculous because they're doing like this freelance work where they're supposed to kill a squid that wants to eat like the gold people's batteries or something. Like it was just funny. Like it was just a funny mission. But after that, did we see Star-Lord's parents?
I think the very first scene is Star-Lord's parents.
Oh, even before that?
I think so.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I feel like that was the very first scene, was them driving in the car, and then it was like, oh, now flash forward, here's where we are.
Okay, yes, no, now I do remember that. But fuck, young Kurt Russell.
Oh, that's some serious.
In the car, as far as making older actors look young, like we're there now.
They've done it. We're here. Like they've done it with relatively younger people before. Like they've done it with Brad Pitt in Benjamin Button, and it looked fine in that, but Brad Pitt was not that old in that. Kurt Russell's fucking a gray ass motherfucker right now with some seriously defined wrinkles in his face.
That was incredible. And they have like a few scenes there, like it's just,
and it's not like they're shying away from it either. We're looking fully at him and being like, "Hey, what's up, Kurt?"
Yeah, that was.
I mean, if we can put Paul Walker's face on his brother's face, I guess we can put a younger Kurt Walker's face, or Kurt Walker, father of Paul Walker. Yeah, younger Kurt Russell face on a older Kurt Russell's face.
Speaking of Paul Walker, hey everyone, so there's this film in theaters right now where Kurt Russell is this older, all-knowing character. Vin Diesel says very few words, and there's strong themes about family. It's called The Fate of the Furious, but today we're reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Oh, boy. I do like Kurt Russell's character, to break into spoilers, he's not this fucking blue beam in the sky that's like, I'm gonna open a portal to let down all these other people, kind of. He's like this omnipotous sort of like abstract antagonist who presents himself in like the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of this movie as kind of like, I'm your dad, I'm who you've been looking for, kind of, know. My only complaint with that whole story arc is that Chris Pratt or Star-Lord or whatever, he wasn't super swayed by the dark side. He didn't need like his friends to come in and be like, whoa, like, dude, like you've kind of like, I could have needed like one small scene like that.
Of him doing something bad.
You're right. Yeah.
Because he bought into it after he saw whatever he showed him of like eternity.
When his entire eyeballs kind of go into like galaxy mode. Yeah. I do love the whole like he could create like a ball of like matter or power in his hands, and he's able to have that father-son like toss and catch or whatever. And then later with Yondu, he's like, you made a ball? And then right before like Yandu's about to get like buried by like his dad's like god power, he's like, he's like, when I'm using the arrow.
A fucking example of this script, like, when you write a script, you have the power of...
It's so layered.
You're in the fucking God seat. Like, you can see what happens in the beginning. You can see what happens in the end. You have the power to see so many steps down the road. You have to be ahead of the audience. And that was why I hated Fate of the Furious that we reviewed 2 weeks ago, was it did not see steps down the road. It caught up there at the same time as the audience did.
Right.
Whereas this movie has so much foresight to be like, let's have this scene that's going to serve a purpose of just being, them throwing a ball around, him finally getting the dad-son
because he tells the story about him not being able to throw a ball around, right.
And then he has to see with Yondu, and he's like, I can create a ball, and Yondu says, when I move the arrow, I don't do it, or do you think I do it with my head?
Or he says that right before he gets buried.
Well, he says it twice. He starts it, and he says, says like, do I think I don't control the arrow with my head or whatever? Or maybe he says like, he hints at it somewhat, and then he sort of completes the thought as he's being buried. So it's like a payoff of that sort of plant that he had earlier. It's just a fucking great script.
I do it with my heart.
Yeah.
And fuck this fucking movie, man.
You didn't think you were going to like it this much.
Guys, Mike is a prophet, and he's going to tell you when you're not totally impressed with a first film, and he says,
I have to say that when I actually watched the movie, before hearing your thoughts on it, I thought you were going to hate it. Even after I said like you might like it more, than I came out and I was like, because I think it's very similar to the first one.
I think it's all about...
Because I don't think I saw the flaws that you did in the first one, so I was just kind of like, oh, this is another good addition to the Guardians of the Galaxy sort of verse that they've created.
And I talked about this theory, but I think it almost might be like this sort of, I don't know. I've had some time to think about it, but I also think this sort of like Star Wars theory that I've passed by you and Squad is kind of like we saw Rogue One in theaters, and then we did the Rogue One review, and I think we both gave it a little too high of praise than we thought it was actually, like later, just because we're, oh fuck, it's fucking Star Wars in theaters, and I'm watching it, and it's fucking booming in my ears, and they're bringing back these old things, and I don't know. When Rogue One wasn't really that great of a movie. It was a good movie, but it wasn't great.
I give it 4 fingers. I shouldn't have given it 4 fingers.
Yeah, Jesus, that's high. I think I gave it a 3.5, which is still almost even high, but I don't know. And again, I was kind of like, I missed out on this hype train, and maybe because I'm seeing this one in theaters, I don't know. I went into this movie, though.
I think this is still just a good script, though.
I went into this movie wanting to hate it, and I came out loving it and crying, which I think is the ultimate testament to what a good movie is.
And I think there's things that I could, like, my complaints with this movie are things that really connected with you, like how many, there's almost too much emotions in this. But again, like those scenes in and of themselves are not bad scenes. Like the rocket Yondu, that's not a bad like logic to have for an emotional scene. It's not a bad connection for two
These were two people that were abandoned as at the beginning of birth.
And maybe just shies in comparison to how well established the other emotional scenes are in this movie.
And but then again, you fucking, and again, I thought it leaned too much on that in the first movie, but when again you play fucking Fleetwood Mac with an emotional scene and it's fucking fireworks, you know? Like, it's just, how do you... I don't know. They've really tapped into something.
I thought you were going to hate this because I didn't really pick up on the first one being gratuitous and how much music there was. And maybe just because I was just enjoying the music, and it might have been a little music video-y, but it worked for me just because it was a cool visual with a really nice soundtrack going on behind it, and it just had this whole individual aesthetic to it that like I felt like I hadn't seen in a movie before, and now people are trying to emulate after that. And then in this movie, because of like the scenes where like like the rocket is like fighting all the people and there's music playing, we don't know where it's coming from, or when they're on the spaceship and he's like, oh, Yondu, do we have any of like his old stuff? Like it felt like they were finding excuses, even though there was technically less music. It felt more gratuitous in this movie because they were finding excuses to get it in there, and it was a little too self-aware of like, oh, you guys like that music thing we did in the first one, let's try to fit it in here, even though it doesn't fit with the story because Star-Lord's not actually here. So I thought you weren't going to connect with that stuff and really tear it apart, but it looks like the emotions worked.
I think it was, I don't know, the first, and I don't know if this is just me, you guys can tell me, but the first movie, the music just went on too long sometimes, and there had to have been a larger amount of songs in the first one than there were in this one. It was just like the music never stopped in the first one. I was exhausted by the music. In this one, I think maybe like the repetitive nature of the one song,
Brandy.
Yes, by Looking Glass. Maybe because we revisited that song 3 times, it felt like there was less music. I don't really know the data of like what music was with Volume 1 and Volume 2, but I don't know. I feel like I got a few big action scenes with music, and I like that, where the first one just felt like it fucking never
I think there
ended.
was probably more original score in this movie. I can't remember any original score from the first movie. It's been a little bit, but I can remember some scenes that were actual action that just had original score playing behind them.
I don't even...
Like a lot of the climax was not big musical montages.
Honestly, I don't even remember what the third act of the first movie was. I saw it not that long ago.
It was with like the whole Ravagers like creating the wall to protect from like the Kree spaceship that was trying to crash into not Earth but whatever the other.
There's something about this movie that just seems like it's gonna stick in my head a whole lot longer than the first movie.
I think this movie is more clear and more concise than the first one. It kind of goes all over the place. Like, you know, there's this alien race and there's this alien race, and they're not even that distinguishable between the different alien races, and then there's these humans and whatever. Whereas in this one, like, he's the only human, so when like he makes these references to Earth, like, it makes more sense and stuff like that. And then there's less alien races, there's less characters, which I read was a conscious choice from James Gunn. He thought there was too many characters in the first one, and he was like, let's tone it down and make it simpler, and it fucking works. Like, it fucking worked in Logan. You had less characters in superhero movies is such a better decision to make.
I feel like
even in a movie like this, which is essentially like Avengers without having the establishing movies leading up to it. Like, you can do less characters. You don't have to have a million tie-ins. And if you're going to do it in the credit sequences. You can do 5 even.
But even in the first film, like when they were in jail, like I didn't fucking care that they were in jail. Kind of like it was just kind of like, well, they're gonna get out. Kind of like it was just dumb to me, kind of. It wasn't dumb, but it just didn't matter as much to me as Rocket kind of like staying back and, fixing the ship or whatever. And there's this whole like kind of like Nebula verse, who's going off against like Baby Groot, who's like, you don't want your friends to get hurt, do you? Kind of like thing. And there was just like so much more of a complex kind of relationship. Or just Elsa didn't care that they were in jail. I don't know. It was a film that meant more to me.
The Nebula Gamora storyline is one of the ones that I felt was a little extraneous in this movie.
They covered it in the first film, and them revisiting it in this was a little more emotional, but I don't know.
It just didn't felt like it. There's times where it does work. Like Nebula does work in this because her, like you mentioned, the scene with her and Groot is necessary for the whole mutiny to happen in order for the Rocket and Yondu to meet up, in order for Yondu to essentially reconnect and be able to find his way to where they are at that point then anyway. So like it works technically, but it was just I didn't care about Gamora reconnecting with Nebula, her sister. Like, and I didn't even remember that it was a thing from the first movie because I didn't care in the first movie at all either.
Oh, I did remember that. I do really like the scene with like Kraglin, who again is played by Sean Gunn, who is James Gunn's younger brother. Sean Gunn is also like a really popular character. Kirk Gleason from Gilmore Girls. Yeah, no, that's like what he's from. That's what he's known from. But when he's kind of like, what are you gonna do with like your cut? You know, of like, you know, when we, I think when they like sell out the Guardians or whatever. I'm not exactly sure. And she says like, I'm going to buy a warship that I can destroy like my sister with. And he's like, don't you want to just buy some jewelry or some nice clothes,
a pretty dress
like
or something?
Something that the other girls would like, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was more just like a vehicle for that punchline there. That was one of the punchlines that did fall short for me. I felt like it was trying a little too hard.
I kind of like
I
that.
could see the setup happening.
I do like his character though, like how
I like his emotional storyline with Yondu, where like he doesn't feel as appreciated by Yondu.
Yeah, and again, he kind of has this jealousy of Star-Lord, and at the end, he has this. He has this jealousy of kind of Star-Lord, kind of as like almost again like looking back like a brother who receives less, attention from a parent, and at the end, what's his name? Kraglin is able to look at Star-Lord and be like, Captain, like as they're mourning Yondu together, kind of, you know, and it's very touching. I don't know. There's a lot of, and even in like one of the fucking bazillion after credit scenes, we have this whole father and son theme that keeps playing over and over and over and over again. And Chris Pratt has to walk into like teenage Groot's room and, kind of scold him as a father. And it's kind of like this cyclical like moment where this father-son thing keeps going and going and going.
And then we even have the scene with Kraglin taking the mohawk and the arrow and trying to learn how to do that like Yondu did.
Also, what about that Yondu scene where he kills like fucking 500 people? That was on the spaceship.
That was the thing where the music was cool in that, but I just didn't like how they had to kind of stretch to get the music to work in there. But that was a really cool scene.
That was. I really liked that a lot.
I was kind of mad that Yondu died in this movie, just because I thought the arrow was a really cool set piece in this movie and just made for really cool sequences. Like, he's the only one that I feel like has like a really defined power of the Guardians. The rest of them kind of are just like shooting arrows. I also really liked the scene where the Guardians all quote unquote have that sort of, they did it in Avengers to less effect, but in this one, because like we care about these characters, when the camera's kind of circling around them and they create this big montage of like, here's all the Guardians sort of like standing with like their weapon and like getting ready for like battle, like was a really cool scene in this. And it made me pumped for like, I want to see all of these characters come back in Guardians 3, but then they kill Yondu.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. It was just a pretty graphic scene though, where he's killing like 500 people, and it made me think of like I was watching some sort of interview with Vin Diesel, where it was just some sort of like Entertainment Weekly, like, hey Vin Diesel, like, you do the voice of Groot, and now you do the voice of Baby Groot, and it was like kind of like, you know, like they don't even have to use that many sound effects or like that many audio, like, you know, changing like effects on Vin Diesel because he can do a high voice, and like they showed him and he's like, hi, I'm Groot, and I was like, if you think that they use that, you're fucking stupid. But also Vin Diesel at some point says like, I love these movies because I can take my children to these movies because they're too young to see Fast and they're too young to see XXX or whatever, my porno film. And but this film is pretty violent for children. Like, even though you have Baby Groot,
it's not
which
like
is
bloody violent. There's a lot of death, but it's not like gratuitous bloody violence, though.
But I mean, I've read a lot about people thinking that the Yondu scene is a little violent because he kills around like 500 people and there's just dead bodies falling, and it's not like an arrow going through somebody. It's like a bullet where it's just like a bullet wound kind of. It's kind of like you just see it go through somebody. It's very kind of like threading like through some. It's kind of like disturbing. But I thought even more disturbing was when they're just taking like the people one by one and kind of like putting them outside of the rocket ship into space.
Was a little, that was actually a little.
That's a little gruesome for like kids.
But I don't think it's necessarily. There is some adult humor in this, and I think like I saw Deadpool, obviously well discussed on this podcast. Did not like Deadpool. But then we saw Logan, and I was like, oh, this is what like all superhero movies should be. Like, you know, these characters need to have the ability to use the F-bomb and stuff like that. I still think it really works for Logan, and specifically the Wolverine character. But I think seeing this renewed my faith that they don't have to use foul language and to be ultra-violent and sexual in order to, A, get the same messages across, but just be... Like, nothing about these characters felt like unrealized by being limited by being a PG-13 movie. Like,
I didn't even realize it was a PG-13 movie, but I mean, I also now remember like when Groot says like, I am Groot, and then Yondu says like, what did he say? Like before he sacrifices himself, and Rocket says like, welcome to the frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy.
Only he didn't say frickin'.
Yeah, only he didn't say frickin'. Yeah, so I mean, I can understand that a little bit, but
I think that like it's sort of playing on the idea that they can't say that in here.
Yeah.
But like, there's no real part in the script where I'm like, oh, besides that, but that's intentional that they're making you reckon. Like, they could have easily not had frickin' or fucking in there at all. Mm-hmm. You know, and it wouldn't have felt like an unrealized line. Like, there's no line in this that feels like, oh, like, you know, it's not like they're saying like, oh, dookie, or all like, you know, other like, you know, other like surrogate words for swear words elsewhere in here. Like the characters, and they don't feel unrealized in any way. That was just my opinion. But like, seeing this made me have less respect for Deadpool, kind of leaning on the crutch of like, oh, he says dirty words and he's got a foul mouth and he's got a dirty mind and all that. And it's like this
and he has sex with every holiday.
Like, this was so much funnier than Deadpool, I thought, and it didn't have to go to vulgarity at all. And like, anyone could kind of enjoy the humor in this movie.
Yeah,
there was one or two vulgar lines, like, but they were very quick. Like that when Drax is talking about like his wife, and he's like, "Oh, like she didn't dance at all," and Chris Pratt's like, "Oh, that sounds really hot," and he's like, "My member was engorged."
My father would always tell me about the like the night my mother made me.
Drax really was like the funniest character from this.
Yeah.
But you want to get into some ratings?
Let's get into some ratings.
On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 81% based on 277 reviews, with an average rating of 7.1 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's acting... Why can I not read this line?
You're drunk!
It's because there's like plural and then possessive going on too quickly. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's possessive, action-packed plot, dazzling visuals, and irreverent humor add up to a sequel that's almost as fun, if not quite as thrillingly fresh as its predecessor.
Disagree.
Which part? Go ahead. Go into your...
It's not as good as...
oh, you think it's better than its predecessor?
Yeah, I know. I do think it's better than its predecessor. Predecessor. Okay, I'll go first. I haven't totally landed on a score.
I haven't either.
But, again, the dad rock, I think really triggered... I think it was obvious how it leaned on triggering emotions in the first one, and this one it was a little more subtle. Again, like I said, the plot movie was... I thought the first movie was plot driven. I thought the second movie, this movie that we're reviewing right now, was a little more character driven, which I love. I don't know. I liked we didn't get to talk about it, but the during credits or post credit scenes of the Stallone, a part of the Ravagers. I thought that was a cool setup for the third movie.
I was very confused because I always confused Ving Rhames and Michael Clark Duncan. And I saw that and I was like, why are they bringing Michael Clark Duncan back from the dead via digital creation for a movie that he can't star in? And then I was like, oh, it's Ving Rhames.
But it just seems like another sort of like faction that could have some sort of conflict. The Adam Warlock kind of thing that they bring up with the gold people. I don't know this fucking comic.
He was apparently supposed... Adam Warlock is a member of the Guardians in the comics, and he was supposed to be in this movie. That was what I guess what I meant to bring up before, is that James Gunn had him written into this movie, and then it was like, you know what, there's too many characters.
Right.
Fucking, what good people do is they kill their darlings.
Yep.
And he was like, we don't need Adam Warlock in this movie. He's for another movie.
Right. And then the Stanley and the Watchers... I actually know a little bit about the Watchers. The Watchers, just because I've read a few comic books with like the Watchers are sort of like this all-knowing like society who kind of fucked up shit in the past. So now they just watch.
And they don't interfere.
Right. Yeah. And with like Avengers plots, they'll be like, "Oh, you won't believe what the Avengers are doing." They're kind of like this narrative device that like Marvel Comics uses. And it was super interesting that Stan Lee in this movie is talking to the Watchers, describing to them all the cameos that he's had in Marvel movies, which is like super meta, and it would really be poetic if he like died and this was his last.
He has a line. What is in the post-credit scene? He has a line like, "Oh, I have so many more stories to tell," or something like that. Yeah. Which like. It's just a kind of a cute ending line from Stan Lee.
Yeah, that would have been... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he'll die now.
Fucking die, Stan Lee! I like Stan Lee, but I don't...
Yeah, I don't...
Sometimes it's a little much how much people care about Stan Lee. Like,
yeah, same.
He's an old guy. I'm sure he's got some crazy... unpleasing views about things if we asked him. We just never ask him.
Yeah, definitely.
Stan Lee, how do you feel about Black Lives Matter?
Exactly.
He's like 94. Mm-hmm. He probably doesn't like black people.
I don't know. I just don't want as many of those darkies in my films as... I don't know. Just keep them out of here. I don't know.
The PR campaign of the century is not asking Stan Lee how he feels about what's going on in society.
I feel like I've said everything I need to say about this film. During this film, I feel like I've gushed about it. I think I'm going to give it 4 fingers.
Damn.
Which is high.
I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to land.
We'll
find out when I'm done talking.
This is in my top 5 movies, superhero movie. Or this is my top 5 movies of this year. This film.
See... I don't want to like rehash all the things that I've said throughout this review, so I'll sort of try to explain where my thought process is as I try to land.
You're right, yeah, we remember.
Yeah. I really liked the first one. I didn't think it lived up nearly to the hype, but I don't think anything could live up to the hype that was generated for the first one. And I think my initial feeling coming out of the theater for this was that it's at best no better than the first one. Mm-hmm. and maybe leaning more towards being just slightly worse than the first one.
Right.
Maybe just because I wasn't as touched by the emotions as at first coming out of this movie, and it was more just a really good comedy. Like, I laughed so fucking hard during this movie. Like, I haven't let out like really good, generous laughs like I did during this movie in like a long time. I felt like, just because I feel like comedy is in a weird place in terms of cinema. We don't get a lot of really good,
Definitely
funny comedies lately.
We're probably not going to get a better comedy than this during this year.
Probably not.
Unless we're going to go see Snatched. Or Baywatch. What are they up to? It's got The Rock.
But I think the more that I've been able to sit back and reflect on this movie, I mean, I always knew that it was fun coming out of the theater, but I think the genius of the script has really started to set in on me. And especially as I try to analyze this movie for this podcast, I think this is a way better script than the first movie was, just in terms of technical details. But I think it ends up for greater payoffs. And I think there's more memorable scenes in this because of how well crafted the script is. Like, nothing feels like a random thing that comes out of left field, so that it's easier to remember these scenes because they weren't surprising when they came out in this movie. They were just so well established. So I think it has to be a better movie than the first. I don't know if, yeah, I think I got to give it a 4. I don't know. It's between a 3.5 and a 4.
Right.
I really can't think of anything that's that bad. And like, even the things that I complained about, I feel like I'm still just kind of like throwing stones in it because I don't want to accept that a Marvel movie could be this sort of entertaining.
Same.
I think if I give Logan a 4, I have to give this a 4, if not only just for how fucking funny it is. Like, it maybe didn't touch me as much as Logan did emotionally, but the humor was so fucking on, I felt like, this entire movie. And just the general, this is what I want, like, summer, like, popcorn blockbuster movies to be. Like, I just want to go to the movies and just like be able to enjoy the movie and have fun and laugh, because I'm not thinking about like this movie couldn't do like the basics of establishing like story and plot and character throughout. And this does all those, and it succeeds in being funny and fun. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to give it 4. So it's going to come out to a 4. 4 plus 4 is 8 divided by 2.
It's 4 again. So, how many fingers is a podcast? We're going to give that 4 fingers.
Yes.
Out of 5.
And if you disagree or if you agree, please leave a comment wherever you're listening. SoundCloud, YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, you can always hit us up on Twitter or Facebook or any of our social media. We would love to join the conversation about what you thought about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, continue the conversation.
Volume 2.
Because there's never really a comment that we don't respond to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, let us know what you think. We'll talk to you about it. Any social media outlet that you are on right now.
And you can find all those at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. You like that fucking transition, Joe? Yeah. And you can find pretty much everything we got on howmanyfingerspodcast.com, including a link to iTunes where you can rate us or leave a review. We would love to hear either of those. It's a great way to support the podcast without spending any money. You can just boost us on iTunes with your rating or your review.
Give us a boost.
Give it a boost. You can sign up for our mailing list on MailChimp. Again, link on the website. We'll send you emails every time we post a new episode or just news announcements going on with the podcast. You can subscribe to our YouTube. Link on the website. Again, we would love some more subscriptions there. You can find our merch store, howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. Or again, link on the website. We got koozies, we got t-shirts, we got stickers, and we got all 3 in a package deal for $11.99 plus shipping at howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. And as always, Amazon link and an iTunes link on our website. Click on either. Anything you purchase within each respective platform within the next 24 hours will get a cut of. Easy way to support us. And check out a review of I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, the Netflix movie picked up from Sundance. We'll be reviewing that next week.
We sure will.
We sure will. Signing out for How Many Fingers the Podcast. I'm drunk and I'm Mike.
I'm Joe and I'm drunk.
Goodbye.